I never consider myself established or anything like that. I just, I follow my feelings, my passion, my dream, and my intuition and curiosity, and then I don't have specific plans for my life. I go with the flow.
Can we discuss this? What's your identity? What's important to know about you?
Well, first of all, I am a synaesthete, which I discovered later. But I knew I was a musically trained student or professional student since a very young age. Since, I started playing piano seriously, very well trained since I was 3 years old, which I don't remember much. And then from 6 years old, I was already in a professional conservatory. And then when I was 12, I already was selected to go to Curtis, which, so it was just everything that seemed already chosen for me instead of myself. So, it came with struggles, my questioning of who I am. That's why there were a couple of years I didn't practice much, but I was sort of doing a soul searching kind of journey. And I tried a lot of different things. And then I took classes in psychology at Wharton also. So I was able to take classes at UPenn. So I took, French also. And I met a lot of friends who are not musicians, which was, I think, extremely helpful. Not only I think, I'm certain that because of this opening, this possibility, and after only finding out that I could be a contemporary musician, that made me stay with music. And then it just continued that way. And I think I started to gradually find my path, thanks to my synaesthesia, which I only later gradually learned that I am a synaesthete, as I think lots of synaesthetes didn't know and thought and assumed it was normal for everyone like that. But in any case, it started my path, and I looked more into vivid ways to connect music with others, themes and colors. And I started also I composed a piece myself, which was a graphic notation, but it was just like a painting. For me, it was a painting. And another contemporary group, I remember they selected the piece and they interpreted it and they played it their own way. And I was pretty blown away by it. And then later, some years ago, I received a grant from the French government. So the only criteria was to create a program, a concert program related to French culture or history. So, what I loved the most is always about how beautiful the impressionistic paintings are in by the French painters and also the French composers. So I created and performed at the end this concert program called Sonorous Brushes. So it's kind of interesting. It's the it's a solo piano program with multimedia visuals and their composers and pieces that I commissioned. But the title is Sonorous Brushes, and it's really very much about the action of painting with music. And it's already synesthetic in a sense. So that program later on took off. It was very popular and welcomed in Paris in his premiere. And then it took off. And I remember I performed it, I premiered it in New York. And New Yorker wrote about it and drew an animation or a cartoon where there are colors coming out of the colorful keys of a piano keyboard. I was pretty thrilled when I saw that. So, and then it just one after another. I think it's just I cannot escape it because this is how I actually perceive music and art and my creativity through my synesthesia. When I really realized that I am so much of a synesthete, and it has actually impacted me and influenced me for so long, then I released this album called Synaesthete, and that synesthete album is very much about just colors, different pieces with different colors. And you can tell by the titles, one piece is called Blue Inscription, another one's called Crimson, for example. So these are by very synesthetic composers. And their colors in these pieces happen to be matching very much mine. So that's related to the talk and the presentation I did last time, which I showed, I believe, a chart of composers with different rainbow colors and what it represents, which pitch and notes or key areas for composers. And surprisingly, there are a lot of similarities, really a lot more than you think. So I think in that sense, it just helped me understand the composers even more. So who am I right now? I would not just call myself a pianist. I think I would call myself a synesthetic artist who use piano and multimedia works to express my creativity.
Your style, well, struck me as extremely sensitive. Well, because you are so, you venerate the instrument, like using your own voice and your own body when you do not want to harm it, and at the same time you want to transcend the traditional.
Normally when I play traditional music, people say, oh yeah, very beautiful and sensitive. And then when I do the new things, they just, wow, that's really new and that's really cool. But I think you're so right. I mean, me as a person, I'm very sensitive and I feel a lot, or I see a lot. And I also have a hearing. I actually recently, when I was in California, I did an auditory test, and my bone hearing is about 10 times more than normal people. So in each hall, and even if there are different numbers of audiences and what they're wearing, or the time of the day, the moisture of the day, everything is very different. So I think I hear the nuances and the colors of sounds much better. And then with prepared piano, it's more interesting because you tune in and it's slightly different on every piano, and the position and the friction, everything changes.
What type of synesthesia do you have? And are these types, if you have many, all related to music?
I think my main synesthesia is probably music and colors and lighting. Lightness, darkness, flashes, they're usually moving. Like music, it's moving, it's not static. It's not just like looking at a piece of painting in front of our eyes. But I did remember there was once, so I think my senses are also sometimes not just with music. Smell, taste, and color sometimes can be linked together also. There was once I was walking down Broadway, I believe, somewhere on the street in New York, and I was so struck by all those like little shops. I think it was the Upper West Side, and these like little boutique shops had their own scents and perfumes or scented candles and all those things. And it was particularly a September and autumn, and the leaves were falling, and the smells was wonderful, and the temperature, everything just felt all of a sudden so unbelievably magically poetic and wonderful. And it was almost with a great taste also. And that experience I described to friends. I was astounded and really exhilarated, and I described it to friends right after that walk, and they're like, where did you walk? We want to walk there. So however I described it right after, it must be very attractive. But until now, I still remember how wonderful it was. So I think that was not related to music. And then there's also the other way, which is interesting, because I before thought when I was playing music, if I was listening or playing music myself, and then I started seeing colors, like in my album Synaesthesia, I had included some paintings I painted after I was learning or playing music. But there was once, sometimes it happens without me knowing, the order is reversed, that I went to my Jewish mom in Miami, she took me for a car wash because I don't drive, and then so I was in her car, and she took me to this very colorful car wash that they have all these like lighting and then like water spray on the windows and all that, and then you're out. And I had so much fun, so much fun. So when my friend came to visit and stay with us too, I said, we have to go to that car wash again to show him all this. And then there was this like great light, that I was describing it. And I said, there was this like rock music playing. And then she said, oh, but there was no music playing there.
What are your first recollection of your synesthesia from childhood?
From childhood, not so much, only that I used to think the middle E on the piano is a bright light. Well, I still think so. It's a very bright yellow, like a really, really bright golden ray. And I thought that time I was scared. I was very young, and if my mom left me alone in the house to practice, if she was busy, I was scared. And maybe as many kids are scared of evil spirits or ghosts or whatever imaginary things, I had came up with my own method to expel the ghosts by playing E, because I thought that golden ray is so radiant and somehow pious or something that it would expel the evil spirits.
It's a good method. So do you still do it?
Haven't for a while, but you never know.
And how did you come to know about synesthesia as a scientific phenomenon, as a scientific object?
Much later in my life, I think I was already doing my master's degree at MSM in New York. And like I mentioned, I was sitting in a lot of composers classes. And so in composers classes and music history and literature, I would look at pieces and composers. And then I think it was about Messiaen. So yeah, I think because he was especially very well known as a synesthetic composer, and or Scriabin, something about the two, that was my first actual realization, like, oh, there are other people like that's something. No, I before used to think that everyone felt and heard music like me. Um, and then at that point I thought, so that's something not normal? Like, is that something unique that's even worth talking about?
Well, there is so many pieces of music by synesthete composers in your collections and in your repertoire. Why so? Do you feel that that a musician or a composer is a synesthete? Is there a method that unites you without knowing that they are synesthetes?
Perhaps I am especially naturally drawn to more synesthetic composers. The way I hear their music and the way they write their music. I just remember the first time I was a very young student still in China. And for the very first time, I heard Debussy's La Mer from the speakers from a CD my dad bought me or something. And I was stunned because I think I was used to just more piano colors. And maybe I've heard a lot of like Beethoven or something in live performances too. But such an impressionistic piece with so many orchestral sounds and about the ocean. That experience is hard to describe. I was like swimming in the ocean, I I never dived that deep, but I never dived before and that time, but it was just so exactly matching how I would imagine and picture ocean sea life.
How does synesthesia probably, or some other attitudes of yours to music, help you to break through, to break up this frame of inskillment, to venture out into more experimental, and risky music.
That's a great observation. Um, I think you're totally right. And I know still a lot of great classical musicians who have not broken the boundary or the comfort zone or the deeply invested world they invested in with their skills and taste even. And some they do wish to break free, but are completely engaged in their traditional skills, which were formed and trained for years. Um, I always had the drive to break free. That is, call me a rebel, but it's always been part of my personality. And I think synaesthesia just helped me. Maybe it gave me some additional abilities or intuitions or sixth sense or out of everyday norm boundaries, like, a little bit beyond boundaries that help me to search for more. Like from my background, I came from very extremely controlled China and conservatory. My parents just wanted me to practice piano 10 hours a day, and everyone was extremely competitive, rigid. So, and Kurt is not exactly a very encouraging place for experimental music. So my drive, my inner self was always calling to break through, I think. But how, right? How? And a lot of people might want to or wish to, as I talk to a lot of my Chinese colleagues, but they're not able to. So I think, yeah, thinking back, I think that even without knowing that it's called synaesthesia, this ability, my senses were always especially more sensitive or ahead of others or average perhaps, or my senses are more cross-disciplinary. So just as I was able to, when I connect with friends from Wharton or business school or people in psychology, or later when I lived in Paris or I picked up French really fast or things like that, I think I was able to apply it in other creative ways to help me find new music and new artistic things and programs too.
Who was in the history of music the first composer who thought about breaking through into our into the realm of probably other senses?
The first composer in the history, it's hard to say. I mean, do you count it as the people who say they called themselves the term synesthete, or do you mean, whatever from what they did? And I think music is always quite a cross-disciplinary thing. It's and a synesthetic thing. For me, there's not really a beginning or the end or a clean cut. I mean, of course, there are composers who claim to be more synesthetes than the others. But if you look at the history or very beginning, ancient Greek modes or something, ancient Greek art and church modes, and then the art and the chants they were using, it was very much reflected together, right? And then the monks were using gold or whatever. They were drawing out these like very first books of music, like partitions, scores. Yeah, they were using them like Bibles. They were spending so much money and time to like carefully drawn out these music scores with like elaborate drawings with gold and then lining and everything. So that is already together. It's always together, music and visual art. It's just together. It's a form of art. And then when you look at early instruments, the clavichords, the harpsichords, they're so beautiful, right? I have a friend who specializes in early music, and her normal everyday life is to live in castles and dig out really beautiful antique keyboard instruments and play them or repair them or so. And She often posts on Instagram these just beautiful insights, like these beautiful paintings or carvings of these instruments inside. And for me, that's very much together also. And really, which composer composes without having imageries in their heads, without having stories in their minds? And also opera, not only opera, but even all the church music has themes, the passions. They were all telling stories, right? Even if they were not obviously programmatic music, um, they still had all the stories behind. They had, you know, different heroes. The first theme, the first hero, and then the second theme maybe the heroine, and then how they interact in the home key in the beginning, how they're in that one location, and then in the development part, they go and travel to other places, and at the end, they like like classical music forms, they come back home to the starting point, right? That's exactly how classical music theory and form and tonality is based on directions. And directions is a very visual thing already too. And then there's the mood, major, minor. I mean, just simply put, major, minor, different, more chromaticism gives people more of this, tension and drama, and the minor is more melancholic, major is happier. These things are all synesthetic. It's nothing separate, you know what I mean?
Who pushed you along this path to use your senses more than auditory and more than the sense of hearing?
John Cage, if I have to pick one, almost all wonderful, great musician teachers teach music through a very synesthetic way. Was it play this warmer? Oh no, this tone is too harsh. Oh, this, we need a brighter colors. These are like, regular vocabularies in music lessons. But I think it's especially John Cage. And also my last teacher, who's French, and no wonder, Pierre-Laurent Aymar, who was extremely synesthetic and philosophical in his approach to music and in his description. Like, for example, oh, this is like a scroll of like calligraphy opening. This sound is like a dot, like in the calligraphy, a dot, and then smudged around it. I mean, maybe because he's French, maybe he's also just synesthetic, but that works so well. Like we just clicked, and I could get immediately what he was talking about. I could react and produce the sounds exactly what he wanted, and we all had the imageries in our heads, so that was very convenient. And but John Cage, and then also Tan Dun, who is my very close collaborator right now. And yeah, he's just also just an extremely synesthetic person who studied with John Cage, had wonderful exchange with John Cage. He told me, and then he wrote this piece I performed, CAGE, which he actually dedicated to Tan Dun because Tan Dun was teaching him a lesson on the same day that he died. So he was very shocked, and he loved him dearly. And so he wrote this piece with the 4 notes, CAGE, all inside the piano. A wonderful piece. And then Tan Dun himself, I think, John Cage, also with philosophical synesthesia, I believe, with so much Eastern philosophy and chants and imageries, and then also the sounds that trigger different emotions, connected very well with Tan Dun. So Tan Dun, has this water music, which I'm going to, today I just gave a talk and for application for a grant for an international festival in Shanghai, includes Tan Dun's music, which has water music and fire music. The whole concert is going to be actually about, it's like an ancient Chinese literature with monsters inside. So it will have actually like a Chinese versions of mermaids and dragons. And then we have technology like AR. So those visuals will be floating and flying around at in the concert hall. It was a very immersive experience.
What life choices have you made apart from music, that may be dictated and motivated by your synesthesia?
Well, I paint, but I don't know if that's apart from music, and that's very much connected for me with music. I started saving and rescuing tons of animals, um, and they have different personalities and different looks, and I feel like I can communicate with them as well as humans without words. I moved recently into a house with a pretty big garden, and I recently got a lot of flowers, and they're so colorful. And to see my different colors of cats running in the flowers is pretty cool.
You split between two uh, cultural backgrounds. You are
Mm.
multicultural. We know that in synesthesia, lots of effects or lots of influences come from something that is not basic and immediate, but something that is rooted in culture, in language, in symbolic, like music or mathematics or language. These are all triggers for synesthesia. How do you feel about it? Do you have something that comes back to your cultural background that it then reveals in your synesthesia?
Well, you're talking about language. For example, Chinese, it's very much like pictures, right? The words. So I think that element of drawing and images are already so present, much more than the Western languages that's alphabetic. Um, and then it's related to tones because Chinese language is very tonal. I noticed, I think there are studies that a huge amount of, like Chinese perhaps has the highest percentage of people with perfect pitch. And some people thought it might be because of the language that is so tonal and subtle, and that it becomes the hardest part for foreigners to get the intonation. Um, and the writing is difficult because you're like drawing a lot. And so I think that perhaps has already opened more connections for me.
What makes this, how do you see this meaningful balance between the traditional and the experimental? What's meaningful innovation to you?
Just as I had given a talk years ago at a TEDx, uh, and the topic was when classical music meets modern technology. And I have been using modern technology, whether it's AI syncing or body tracking or whatever other things, AI for almost 10 years already before it was able to, create and compose so many things. Um, a lot of people feel excited perhaps or threatened that in the future AI is going to take over entirely and we will for sure already lose a lot of jobs to AI. But for me as an artist, I think it's very important that we don't surrender all controls of creativity to AI. Because for me, that's what makes us human. We might not be the fastest, we might not be the smartest or the most perfect, but we are different and we have unique creativities. And that's what makes us human. And for me, this is all we've got really in the future, in the contest with AI. And if artists even surrender artistic creativity to AI, then there's nothing left. So for me, I think it's wonderful. We cannot avoid the technology and the development, and it's a very exciting thing. But I always often only work with composers, and I compose and try to make programs myself that could use AI as assistants. So assistants using AI to help us realize our human creation and artistic visions better and not the other way around, not to serve the AI, but have the AI serve artists. So that's where I think for me the the line lies.
Sonorous Brushes was a selection that you played in New York. And it was, well, judging by reviews, it was a dazzling performance. So, what motivated you for selecting and learning those pieces that then comprise this concert and this performance, Sonorous Brushes?
I don't remember the entire program in details now because I programmed many pieces and played many concerts after that. But I remember it was mainly the colors. It was the colors and what the music triggered my reactions of seeing intense colors or very vivid lighting and brightness and darkness. For example, the Debussy Prelude for d'Artifice, Fireworks, that piece was what inspired me to paint the painting that I played along. I just projected when I played the piece. That was just so vivid. It came to me as a shock when I was learning the piece. I mean, I love Debussy's pieces and they were always very visual to me, but this one, I didn't even start much. I remember it was the first time I started sight reading the piece. I couldn't even play it through. It's a rather technical piece. And I was just sight reading it, and I was just attacked, really hit by extreme lighting and flashes and colors, strong colors, like from the painting I drew, it was like bright yellow and orange and dark blue and wavy, movements and big clouds that are like very intense and dramatic. So that time I didn't practice much. I just immediately rushed out and I started painting that painting, which was a watercolor, because for me, watercolor, that's maybe my cultural thing too. I see more watercolor and calligraphy. So maybe French and Chinese in that connection, somehow speaking to me more. Because, if it's very concrete lines, for me, it's somehow less natural, like the very fine lines, But if it's smudging around, it seems to me more alive, because my real experience with colors is really, it's moving so fast. And so that was one. And then the other one was Messiaen, Kente Jaya. And that Messiaen piece was given to me by Pierre-Laurent Aymar, and he taught me in depth with that piece. And I loved it. I mean, he's such a colorful pianist, and he demonstrated, and I played. And I remember at the end, the last lesson, I played that piece for him, and he was really, it was like, wow, Jenny, bravo, this is the best one I've heard, like many people play ever. And I always loved Messiaen's music, but to learn that pretty difficult piece in depth was also another experience, because his colors to me are so different than Debussy's. His are very harsh, glassy, bright, intense, but also very clean. Even though they're mixed, like the chords, even in Messiaen, he would say this chord is mixed with purple, green, orange, yellow, whatever. And so each note is a precise color, but it's not like in watercolor, they're, mixed together in the palette. These are absolute colors for him. And I hear that in his music. And it's just like very strong, clean colors. It's like, 20th century kind of more modern art. And so that's when I did this other medium. I think I used a different medium of, what was it? This glassy transparency. I injected colors into it, liquid. It kind of becomes, I'm blanking out. It's almost like glass, resin, right? I did resin art for trying to just capture really maybe the first session of the piece, because it's a long piece and it's just a lot of colors for me. So I did one painting that from the left to the right, from the colder blue kind of color scheme to the more redder color, and the direction was like all going that way. And that was just my feeling of the beginning section of the piece.
how do you use your synesthetic ability in teaching music to the young ones?
Thank you. I am very proud of the students that I taught and produced, and some also recently, many got into Stanford and Princeton, are like lots of wonderful schools, and they're not necessarily just majoring in music. They're cross, and I always encourage them to cross-disciplinary, studies, and also try to double major or don't just put themselves in only in music. Well, I also run a school, so it's not just about teaching. If it's just about teaching piano, for example, I tell them very much about touch, and I might ask them to touch their own legs or touch and actually wipe and touch and caress. Yes, the word caress the keyboard. I mean, that's pretty much the first lesson of mine is I tell students to caress the keyboard as something they really love. Maybe the fur of a cat, maybe velvet, something that I ask them, what's your favorite texture? And then when they tell me, I say, imagine that's your favorite texture you are feeling under your fingers when you're caressing, wiping your fingers across the entire keyboard. So I think that, already creates this sensitivity and also emotional bond with their instrument. Sometimes I ask them to play a sound. I say, have you fallen in love with this sound yet yourself? And then they might listen to it more and try again. And then they would say, no, I don't think I love it yet. And I'm like, okay, great. So how do we make it better? How do we play it? Can you play it and touch it and make it and feel it and hear it and adjust until you fall in love with your sound, until you feel melted by your sound? Only if you are melted by your own sound, then we can be touched by your sound. I sometimes start kids, even 5-year-olds, with extended piano techniques. I know this is a pretty groundbreaking thing because usually it's like I didn't learn extended piano techniques until my 20s and then, my doctorate degree. And this is something people think you have to do or people have done only after you have completely mastered all classical music training. But why can't we do it from the other way around? So recently we successfully got a 5-year-old, a total beginner who could barely read or write a few notes, to write entirely her own piece with graphic notation, to draw out the imagery she wanted, like something like, I don't know, different things like a lion, a peacock, the lion's chasing the peacock, but they want to make friends, and then dinosaurs, and oh, the earthquake or something, all these things. And then we helped her and made 3D animations with it for her to pair with her music and to react with her music. And then I chose and I taught her the extended piano techniques, like, oh, you play like this area, things maybe also Kortak has written a lot of it, like in his Yadakoks, in his games for kids or for masters, that 8 volumes that Kortak invented that I absolutely love. But similar methods, or Harry Cowell, so clusters, rolling arms, and different things, just to look for the colors, for not to strive for the specific notes, but to tell the story, look for the colors. And the performance was so successful. She was like the star of the night, more than people who play Ligeti etudes, and everyone just talking about this 5-year-old.
What advice would you give to people with synesthesia, especially with music synesthesia, when they're trying to forge their own musical path?
It might sound overly simplified, but I want to say follow your heart, follow your intuitions, because synesthetes, I believe, have extra senses, and that's the ability. Maybe we forge new senses. Maybe we just feel a bit more than average. And these are special talents. They're special abilities. And I think just experiment with them and welcome these extra senses, and then just follow your intuitions. I do believe, I don't know if it's true or not, but I do believe synesthetes probably have stronger intuitions than normal people due to these extra senses. So that's a wonderful thing, and it's a wonderful gift. And one is stay authentic to yourself. Do not feel or fear the judgment of others, the pressure of the society, or whatnot, anything. That, whether a person has synesthesia or not is irrelevant, but I think it's so important for people to live a fulfilled life, to live an authentic life.
How do you envision the near and distant future of music, and what role can synesthesia play in it? And how are you planning to further push the boundaries of the evolution of music?
Like I said, I believe that in the future, in the past, all the form of music was rather synesthetic, whether it's from connected with storytelling or colors, imageries. And there were composers like Scriabin or Wagner who believed that music should be connected with lighting, colors, costumes, smell, scents, a lot of things. I just think that with modern technology, we will be able to realize these things more and more. So I am, in some way a forerunner of using music with the technology, and all these things are already so possible. Now we have already robot opera. I have played together for many years with AI, and AI co-creation, and the thing I said about AR, the augmented reality, with things emerging together. I think that's another really wonderful way to give a more immersive experience that's more synesthetic, because the audiences, you have to consider a concert hall is a space. It's a space, it confines itself already, and the people just sit there. They sit there, they cannot escape, right? It's sort of like a globe. And then they have the person, the performer, maybe a big screen nowadays with audiovisual music in front of them. And all they have is to watch in the front and listen with their ears. And but that's still, in some ways single dimensional. It's focused in that. And with the augmented reality that I'm creating together with a partner, and I have already done concert like that in the botanical garden, for example, where we had little huge magical animals and creatures flying and floating around, and flowers and plants, digital, but in an augmented reality kind of way among the botanical garden space in front of a waterfall, and people with their phone or iPad can just look around, and they can look and focus on anything they want. For example, oh, there's a pretty fly, a digital fly staying somewhere on a flower, or there's a spinning lotus there on top of the piano stage, So I'm trying to make the new concert where all the creatures would fly around like the dragons and mermaids, and then there will be water and fire world of the entire thing. So you sit there without your phone and all that. It's just a normal concert. And then you pull up the phone and then search and look in different areas and corners. It's a different world. It's a different dimension. And I don't know what more there could be. I only look forward to the future of possibilities that everyone comes up with.
My personal hope is probably someday you will be part of the synesthesia conference.
Oh, lovely. I would love to come. Yes. And if such events are planned, please let me know ahead of time, and I will arrange my schedule and love to come.